As you can see on the picture, there's a path this way and there's a path that way.
Go to the right. Go to the right. It's a little bit upward, but it's better. The other goes down. You're going to have to really walk later.
Yeah, then you gotta walk
And you
up.
know you're on the right path.
You can see the trees in the
If it's uphill the
background.
whole
You go
way.
left, you're going to be lost. You go right, you're going to be all right.
There is a clip I have. I want us to concentrate on the clip because it's an analogy of of the different paths that can be taken within a church. And I'd like us to discuss it a bit, and we're going to see it at the end again. I believe some of us have seen this clip before, but I want us to concentrate on it. I want us to be open to participate. It's an analogy of the church.
On a dangerous seacoast where shipwrecks often occur, there was once a crude little life-saving station. The building was no more than a hut, and there was only one boat. But the few devoted members kept a constant watch over the sea. With little to no thought for themselves, they went out day and night, tirelessly searching for the lost. Some of those who were saved and various others in the surrounding areas wanted to become associated with the station and give their time, money, and effort to support the work. New boats were brought in and new crews were trained, and the little life-saving station grew. Some of these new members of the life-saving station were unhappy that the building was so crude and poorly equipped. They felt that a more comfortable place should be provided as the first refuge of those who were saved from the sea. They replaced the emergency cots with beds and put better furniture in the enlarged building. Now the life-saving station became a popular gathering place for its members, and they began to use it sort of as a club. Fewer members were now interested in going to sea on life-saving missions, so they hired lifeboat crews to do this work. The life-saving motif still prevailed in this club's decor, and there was a memorial lifeboat in the room where the club initiations were held. About this time, a large ship was wrecked off the coast, and hired crews brought in boatloads of cold, wet, half-drowned people. They were dirty and sick, and some of them were foreigners. The beautiful new club was in chaos immediately. The property committee hired someone to rig up a shower outside the club, where victims of the shipwreck would be cleaned up before coming inside. The outsiders made the life-saving station extremely dirty. At the next meeting, there was a split in the club membership. Most of the members wanted to stop the club's life-saving activities because they felt that they were unpleasant and a hindrance to the normal social life of the club. But a small number of members insisted on life-saving as the primary issue and pointed out that they were still called a life-saving station, after all. The dissenting group's members were voted in and told that if they wanted to save lives, they could begin their own life-saving station down the coast. So they did. As the years went by, however, the new station experienced the same changes that had occurred in the old station. It evolved into a club, and yet another life-saving station was found. History continued to repeat itself, and if you visit that eastern seacoast today, you will find a number of exclusive clubs along that shore. Shipwrecks are still frequent in those waters, but most of the passengers drown.
Clip say. What's it say to you?
You gotta keep the main thing, the main thing, the main thing.
And to you, the main thing is what? Because I'm just asking to you, I'm not saying, I want you to correctly critique this clip or something, I'm not saying that. And what's the main thing to you, Dave?
The main thing is keeping my relationship with Christ in Christ instead of in me.
Okay?
What it says to me is lost, and people got off focus, and there's lost people out there and they're drowning. And there's no one to help them anymore. For this, it needs to, there's a lot of people out there that don't know Jesus and they're drowning. And how many are going out to rescue or help save them to Christ?
Anyone else? What does this mean to you? What does the club mean to you?
I'm looking at it kind of a different way. You're lost, you're rescued, but then you become lost again. Yeah, that's kind of what the struggle was rediscovering being lost. And then not caring, you know, I'm comfortable now, so we can do other things, you know. It's like, you're in constant need of being rescued. That will never change. You're always going to have the poor among you, but, you know, you just have to be ready and recognize, like some of the people who shared today, you have to recognize that you're lost. Because when you cease to do what you originally came there for, then you have to refocus. You may have to go in a different direction, but you're still going to be doing the same task. That remains the same.
Anyone else?
To me, it was,
Thank you.
it reminded me of the church, where when you're a small body, your focus is on the lost and growing people, and then when they got bigger, it was like, well, they didn't, and then they were bringing people in, and it made it all dirty. You know, they've got this brand new, building and furniture, and then when they...
And what did also they do in that new club, or the new life-saving station? What else did they do? Did you hear what they said?
It
Build a
was-
shrine
They were so
Okay,
good.
and they built a shrine of what?
of the lifeboat.
Of a lifeboat. That's like putting a cross up in the church somewhere. Okay, what else did they do? They hired people to go out and get people.
And they
Did
became
you?
a clique.
Yeah.
They became, but they hired people.
They hired people. to go
They
out.
hired people to be the people that go out.
Then they installed an outdoor shower.
And then, because it became dirty in there.
It became exclusive.
Rather than a hospital for sinners, it was a...
It became dirty in there, so they wanted them clean before they brought in.
A country club.
Yeah, social status.
Do you see? There's a lot of little layers in this thing.
Right.
It's,
And then then some wanted to stay, some wanted to just be the club, and other people wanted to go back to the original purpose, and then there was a split, and so they went down the street, or down the coast, but then the same thing happened again and again.
and why is that? We're going to talk about it. Why is that? Is the church a religious club? What do you have to do in a club?
Join.
Be a member, pay dues.
Okay, pay dues. And some people think that the church is sort of a club. You tithe, that's paying your dues. And if you tithe and pay your dues or do certain things, then you are what? A member, and what happens then because if you're a member?
Privileges.
You have certain privileges. You have certain... Is that what the church is?
Absolutely not.
Is that what the church is? The church a religious club? Anybody?
Yes, it can be.
Sure.
It can be.
Shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be, but it is.
It,
Church I grew up in.
Is God's church a religious club?
No, but there's this entropy principle going on.
Which we talked about last week, right?
Right.
Is God's church a religious club?
No, it's a people.
And what
Christ
is,
said, you are the church. And we make it, we take a different, we are the church, but we exclude the qualifications and stuff. We put different qualifications up.
what is tithing? What is that about?
It is your first fruits.
Yeah, but what is it? Why do we do that? It's worship, friend. That's all it is. It's worship. Because I found, and as Martin Luther said, there are three conversions. There's the conversion of the head, there's the conversion of the heart, and there's the conversion of the pocketbook. If your money is in the middle of God, if your money is in the middle of God, you got to have God in your life then. If you want to find out about somebody, look at their time, look at where they spend their money. That's who they are. Isn't that right?
Yep.
So, because I've heard it before. If you don't get, I'm going to withhold my tithe if this doesn't happen. Maybe you need to be in my seat. I've heard it. Or if things don't go my way, I'm going somewhere else. I've heard it. What do you mean? What's the church? What is the church? What's the marks of the church? The church becomes unhealthy when, let's talk about that. The church becomes unhealthy when
Gossip. There's gossip.
okay,
People start talking about each other.
Loose.
gossip. And why is that a sign of unhealth?
Because it's a tearing down, not a lifting up.
Okay, what's the opposite of gossip?
Truth.
No, truth can be gossip.
That's true.
What's the opposite of gossip?
Encouragement.
Love. What if we'd actually love each other? And love means what? We use 1 Corinthians 13. Well, love. How about if we love? We actually become very patient and endure one another. And it's not about keeping a record of wrongs. And it's not about having our own way. Seeking our own, what we think. It's preferring one another. Church becomes unhealthy when? Anybody else?
When our desires become the chief thing, and other people, everyone has desires, but so that's what we focus on, our own personal desires. It's going to cause friction, it's going to cause gossip, it's going to cause all things are going to come out of that because we're self-oriented. And it's not about that. That's why we came to the church to begin with.
And everybody,
You know,
if everybody has their own agenda, there's no unity. It's not a question.
I remember that story you shared at one time where there was a building program that was proposed, and there was a person in that was opposed to that for certain reasons, because he thought, no, but then he turned towards his comfortableness and things like that. But his own personal feelings, what happened was they went ahead with the building program, but that person was the first one on site with the hammer and dictator. Because he was going to go with what the decisions were made, even though he didn't feel that was what was. You have to find that spot where, even though you disagree, you're willing to, compromise, It's not eternal. Okay, I am going to be a part of the solution, because if he didn't, he'd be part of the problem now. He didn't let it become something that I'm going somewhere else, or I'm going to withhold my tithe, or blah, blah, blah. I'm going to withhold my relationship, all that stuff. It comes down to choices.
I just always think it's so ironic when there's conflict, people don't come together. They pull apart and go their separate ways. It's so ironic. Because it says if you have something against your brother, you are to go to him. But what if it's not exactly sin? What if it's just my opinion versus their opinion? Can we lay it down? Or we're just going to take our opinion and go somewhere else? Church becomes unhealthy. To me, the main purpose of the church is, what's the main purpose of the church?
Make disciples.
To make disciples. Someone else. The main purpose of the church is.
To build up and equip.
Excuse me?
We need to build each other up and equip each other.
Make disciples. Same thing.
Seek the lost.
Okay, seek the lost. Seek and save the lost, or just seek them?
Seek and
Save.
save.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. We need to get...
Part of making disciples.
Okay. First got to get the fish, and you get the fish in and clean them up. And then what the fish are supposed to do, they're supposed to end up, all this is to what?
Make disciples.
To glorify God. This is all about glorifying God, isn't it? It's the 3 E's. What are we here for? To exalt the Savior, worship. We are here to equip the saints, discipleship. We're here to evangelize the world, reach out to people that don't know Jesus, right? It's the same mission throughout the ages.
Save our soul.
The main purpose of the church is split and divide when? Churches split and divide when?
Selfishness sets in.
Selfishness sets in. Someone else.
When we think our way is the only, well, that's a selfishness too. We forget our purpose.
How about if we, the church is the same according to God and the Bible, right? Is the same as a husband and wife. Isn't that right? Isn't that what the Bible says? So, marriages split and divide when? How about if we go there? Maybe we can have marriages split and divide when?
When there's irreconcilable differences.
Irreconcilable.
differences.
And what would constitute an irreconcilable difference?
Communication.
Yeah.
Neither one will give it.
It's my way or the highway philosophy.
Communication is important.
Okay, communication obviously is important.
I'm right, you're wrong.
But we can communicate until the cows come home. It doesn't mean we...
Resolve anything.
Isn't that right? We can communicate all we want to.
Right, I'm talking about where the two people actually want to resolve things and it's work that, you can sit down and you can have a conversation. But when the communication starts breaking apart, then it can cause a big problem.
Churches split. All it takes, a marriage, all all it takes is one of the persons really not to work it out. Isn't that right?
That's right.
All it does is take one.
Right.
Church is split. When this thing comes in, people, that says, I'm not going to work it out. I'm right, and when I'm sharing, I'm hoping I'm going to convince you that you're going to come to my side. When people have already made up their mind, the Lord gave Moses permission to get a divorce. When what happened? When the people's hearts were hard. It says, if their hearts are hard, that's when God gave Moses permission to get. I remember early on as a pastor, I'm sitting down with this couple. It was 3 months in. He was in trouble. I had been talking with him. He's saying his wife wants to divorce. I said, are you guys willing to sit down? They both came in. Here I am. I'm only 3 months as a pastor, way back 25 years ago. And this is what she said. The statement that grabbed me. I'm tired of trying. It's over. That's a hard heart. I'm done. When people have this, I'm tired of trying, all that tells me is hardness has set in. And there's no way. Outside of a person opening themselves up to God, it's done. That's what happens. Division. Division is more than one vision. When there's two different paths, people split. Like going back to that one photo with the two different paths, those are two different visions. When that comes down into a marriage and into a church, people go different ways. Why can't we come together? Is the church a journey fulfilling God's purposes? Are you fulfilling God's purpose and call? Is the church a journey fulfilling God's purposes? Are you fulfilling God's purpose and call? There's different paths. And these two guys, they would have breakfast. They're members of the same local church. Every Monday morning, they get together at 6 o'clock. They thought it'd just be a one-time shot, but every week, it started to come every week, and they were in it for 5 months. One of the guys liked poached eggs. It was his regular order, but he wasn't eating it this morning. He barely touched it. He was just sipping his coffee. And he looked at the other and he says, Michael, Lana and I decided to leave the church. And it just seemed like there was a lot of dead space after that. Neither of them knew exactly what to say. And so Michael took the initiative and spoke. He says, you want me to tell you? Do you want to tell me anything about it? He says, Lana and I went to the church to learn deep truths about the Bible. He began to spill out of him. Pastor Robert's just not feeding us. We're not getting anything out of his messages. Sitting in the service on Sunday morning is just a waste of our time. Michael didn't respond. He could tell that he had more to say. There are several great people in the church, like you and Karen are the best, and there are a few more like you. But honestly, Michael, our church is full of hypocrites. Do you hear Jim at the kids' basketball game? He embarrassed me the way he was screaming at the refs. What kind of testimony is that? And of course, everyone knows about Neil. He was supposedly the spill of the church, and we found that he's been cheating with his wife for over a year. What kind of church is this with these kinds of people? All right, so far, what's going on? Let's say you were sitting across from him speaking these things. What's happening? What's happening?
First of all, he's complaining he's not getting anything out of it.
Okay, and?
So it's about him. And, he was
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well,
You
it's-
shouldn't get anything out of it?
Well, it's not necessary, I mean, you don't always get anything out of it. So is God trying to get, I mean, he's learned a lot. So now is he, and then he's looking at people around him with these problems. Is God telling him to pray for these people, talk to these people?
That's
mentor these
interesting. I mean, to
people?
hear all these people that have these problems, how about getting involved, right?
Yeah.
Sitting back and judging. It's interesting. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah,
I know better, so I'm leaving.
great.
Have you heard this one before? I know better, so I'm leaving. Instead of I know better, so I'm pressing in. Obviously, since I know better, I can help.
Right.
It's amazing how that thing gets screwed around in people. Since I know better, I'm taking my truth and my Jesus and leaving. How is that? How many have ever thought that about your own marriage? Now, we're going back to the analogy again. That all of a sudden you woke up one day and said, the person I married screwed up. They got problems. You know what? I knew they had problems, but you know, they're a lot bigger than I thought they were. And yeah, I know I went down the aisle and said, till death do us part, you know, whether it's good or this or that and the other thing, but my goodness. You know what now?
My goodness. That's their focus.
You know what the next step after that is? Go to the mirror and look a little harder. You're going to figure out you're just as screwed up as anyone else. Just as much as your spouse, that's for sure. And so what do they need since you know better? There's no one better than you because they open their heart to you. All right, let's keep going on this. This is an interesting conversation he's having. He's spilling it out. His name's Liam. Liam was angry but controlled as he continued to vent. And look, Pastor Robert acts like he cares for us, but I'm not so sure he does. I told him that Lana's dad was in the hospital for hernia surgery and never visited him. And Michael knew that Lana's father did not come to this congregation. And he lived 50 miles away, but he also knew that Pastor Robert called him and had prayer with him, but he also knew that any rebuttal would not be appreciated at that moment. Michael held his tongue. Now it seemed that Liam's mild rant was winding down. Liam seemed exhausted, ready to bring the conversation to a close. He did, however, offer a few pointed comments and some insightful questions. He says, Michael, I really like you and Karen and your kids. All of you are a class act, he paused. But you seem enthused about the church. You keep serving and contributing. Don't take me wrong, but I wonder at times if you're blind to all the problems in the church. And Liam offered the guy who had this problem, he was ranting and raving, he offered these closing comments that almost startled himself. He says, we are really two different types of church members. Why is that? Why do we have such different perspectives? They're different paths. People can take different paths in the same church. Two different perspectives in the same setting. So what is a church member? Anybody? What is a church member? What's the Bible say about church membership? What is church membership?
Never mentioned membership.
Well, it talks about member a lot in the New Testament. Yep.
Members of the body.
Talks about member. Here's some scriptures. Romans 12, for just as each of you has one body but many members, and these members do not have all the same functions, so in Christ, though many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. According to the Bible, everybody that is a Christian, that has accepted Jesus, is a member. Is a member. Amen. You're a member. Now, I grew up in a church that had membership rolls. What's the problem with a membership roll?
Well, there are other problems associated with it, because some churches think that democracy is in the Bible and you vote about everything. So, someone may have not been there in 5 years, but suddenly when the vote comes around, they're voting from California or wherever.
That's happened before. That's for sure. What's the problem with churches have these membership rolls? What's the issue with that?
Numbers do not equal maturity.
Just because